Camp Pendleton, California, United States Marine Corps Base, July 15, 1971. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. The sun was already merciless. The Southern California summer heat climbing toward 95 degrees. The training ground stretched endlessly, a vast dirt field surrounded by dull green and tan military buildings. American flags hung motionless, the air thick with dust, sweat, and the sharp tang of canvas. In the distance, rifle fire rang out from the shooting range, mixing with the rhythmic cadence of drill instructors shouting commands. 1,000 Marines stood in perfect formation, 10 rows of 100 men each, aligned with precision. They had been standing at attention for 20 minutes, not fidgeting, not moving. These were not fresh recruits. These were combat-hardened men, many of whom had faced the jungles of Vietnam. They were lean, hard, and dangerous, trained in hand-to-hand combat to a level most civilians could scarcely imagine. Ages ranged from 19 to 35, all in camouflage uniforms, all focused forward. At the front, on a raised wooden platform, stood Bruce Lee. 31 years old, 5'7", 140 pounds. He wore simple black training pants and a black t-shirt, no military uniform, no insignia, just a civilian man in a sea of soldiers. He looked small, almost out of place among 1,000 Marines, averaging 6 feet tall and 180 pounds. Yet he had been invited by the Marine Corps Combat Development Command to demonstrate new approaches to hand-to-hand combat, to modernize techniques that were still rooted in World War II-era strategies: boxing, wrestling, basic strikes. Vietnam had proven that close quarters combat demanded more fluidity, adaptability, precision. Standing nearby was Colonel James Morrison, 48 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds, 30 years of military service. A veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, Morrison had trained thousands of Marines and seen the full reality of combat. He was skeptical. Bruce's movements, fast, fluid, controlled, impressed the eye. But Morrison had witnessed countless demonstrations that looked remarkable yet fell apart under real battlefield conditions. He wanted to know if this martial arts approach could withstand the unforgiving test of combat. Bruce concluded a chai drill, 2 practitioners touching forearms. Sensing pressure and energy, he explained that this trained the body to respond faster than the mind. By the time the eyes perceive a punch, the strike is already unfolding, but tactile sensitivity allowed the body to react preemptively. Faster reaction times, improved defense, adaptability. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his voice booming across the formation, commanding attention. "Mr. Lee, with all respect, this looks like dancing. Philosophical, perhaps interesting, but in real combat, in a real war zone, this will not work." The Marines stayed at attention, yet every one of them was listening, tension building on the field. Bruce turned to the colonel, calm and respectful. "Why do you believe it will not work, Colonel?" Morrison gestured at the formation. "These Marines are trained to fight with maximum aggression, maximum force. In combat, you have no time to sense energy or intention. Brute force overwhelming the enemy, that is what works." Bruce nodded. "Brute force is effective, yes. But what if your opponent is stronger, bigger? What if brute force alone is not enough?" Morrison crossed his arms. "Then you use superior numbers, superior tactics, superior firepower. You do not use dance moves." Some Marines smirked quietly, respecting their colonel's combat experience. Bruce's expression remained calm. "Would you like to test whether it is dancing or combat effectiveness?" Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Test how?" Bruce gestured. "Use your military hand-to-hand combat training. Full force, everything you would use in real combat. Show these Marines that brute force is superior." A silence fell over the ground. A civilian had just challenged a full colonel in front of 1,000 Marines. Morrison, reading Bruce, weighed the statement. Was it arrogance, foolishness. Confidence backed by real skill. He knew talking was meaningless. Only action revealed truth. "If I agree, this is real combat, no holding back. I want it that way," Morrison said. Bruce nodded. "If we hold back, this demonstration means nothing. The Marines need to see real effectiveness, not choreographed movements." Morrison looked at his formation. The Marines watched him waiting. He could not back down. His credibility as their combat instructor depended on it. Slowly, he removed his jacket, revealing a thick, muscular frame beneath. Decades of conditioning scars from hard work, years of real combat. He stepped onto the platform. Bruce stepped down. They faced each other on the dirt ground, 15 feet apart, no mats, no padding. The Marines shifted slightly, craning to watch. Size and strength versus speed and technique. Morrison dropped into a fighting stance, honed over years of experience. Bruce stood naturally, relaxed, hands at his sides, breathing calmly. "Put your hands up," Morrison commanded. "I do not need to," Bruce replied. Morrison's jaw tightened. That statement was either incredible confidence or folly. He moved forward, quick for a man his size, closing the distance in 3 steps. A straight right punch aimed at Bruce's face, full force, meant to end the fight immediately. Bruce did not move back, but offlined at 45 degrees. Morrison's fist met only air. Recovering quickly, Morrison threw a left hook. Bruce stepped inside the arc, too close for the punch to have power. Morrison tried to grab him, to lift and throw, but Bruce slipped away, circling to the outside. Morrison attempted a front kick. Bruce met it, redirecting the force with his shin. 6 seconds had passed. Every technique Morrison used was proper, precise, yet none connected. Bruce stayed 1 step ahead, untouchable. Frustration built in Morrison, not exhaustion. He attempted a takedown, aiming for Bruce's legs, but Bruce sprawled, hands on Morrison's head, guiding him down. Morrison's face pressed to the dirt, arms extended, off balance. Bruce applied light pressure with his knee, a tap, a message, not a strike. 12 seconds had passed since Morrison attacked. Bruce released and stepped back. Morrison pushed himself up, dust-covered, breathing heavily. The Marines were silent, stunned. Their colonel, war hero, combat instructor, had been controlled by a civilian half his size in 12 seconds without a strike. Bruce explained calmly, "You fought as you were trained, maximum aggression, maximum force. That works against enemies with similar training. I do not fight the same way. I redirect. I use force to defeat itself." Morrison processed the shift in perspective. The realization that his 30 years of combat experience did not prepare him for this style. Bruce continued, addressing the Marines. "Every one of you is stronger than me, better conditioned for military operations, but I trained something newsy sensitivity, adaptation, using an opponent's force against them. These principles work regardless of size." Morrison regained composure, curiosity replacing embarrassment. "Your training is a foundation," Bruce said, "but incomplete. You train strength and aggression. You do not train sensitivity or adaptation." Turning to the formation, he added, "Your colonel agreed to test these principles in front of you. That takes courage. You can learn this too. Less about power, more about precision." Over the next 6 months, Bruce returned weekly, teaching sensitivity drills, trapping, and close-range techniques to rotating groups of Marines. Initially skeptical, the soldiers began to understand the subtle power behind these methods. Reaction times improved. Smaller Marines began defeating larger ones through better positioning, timing, and understanding. Colonel Morrison, despite his years, approached every session like a beginner, embracing mistakes and learning the new principles. By 1972, the Marine Corps incorporated sensitivity training into its official combatives curriculum. Thousands of Marines were trained in these principles. which would later save lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, situations where brute force alone was insufficient. Years later, Colonel Morrison would recount that July day with gratitude, not embarrassment. Bruce Lee had shown that 30 years of experience did not mean complete knowledge. Learning never stops, admitting gaps is strength, and sometimes the best teacher is the one who humbles you in front of 1,000 witnesses and offers to make you better. 12 seconds that changed military hand-to-hand combat forever. Over the following months, Camp Pendleton became a different kind of battlefield. The Marines, initially skeptical, began to grasp the subtleties Bruce Lee introduced. The drills looked unconventional at first, almost like dance routines to the untrained eye. But the more they practiced, the more the principles sank in. Sensitivity, timing, adaptation. These were not concepts from a book or a demonstration. They were tools that could save lives. Marines who had relied solely on brute strength discovered that there was an elegance to controlled movement, a power in redirecting force rather than meeting it head-on. Colonel Morrison, once the embodiment of raw military discipline, became a student in every sense of the word. He threw himself into the drills with a humility that inspired his Marines. Observing his dedication, even the most skeptical soldiers began to respect this new approach. Every session tested their reflexes, honed their awareness, and reshaped their understanding of combat. What seemed simple in theory, the redirection of energy, the subtle positioning of the body, the anticipation of intent, proved exponentially difficult in practice, yet slowly mastery grew. Bruce introduced chai drills, sensitivity exercises where Marines touched forearms, feeling subtle shifts in weight and tension. At first, the larger men struggled to sense anything through their own forceful movements. But over time, even the most disciplined and conditioned Marines began to anticipate attacks before they happened, their bodies reacting instinctively, faster than their minds could process. They began to see how smaller, less powerful fighters could control larger, stronger opponents with precision, positioning, and timing. The Marines also learned to question assumptions. Combat had always been taught as a series of offensive moves, overwhelming attacks, and strict formations. Bruce encouraged them to think fluidly, to adapt in real time, to let an opponent's energy guide their response. By the end of the 6-month period, the difference was evident. Marines who once struggled against heavier, more aggressive peers were now capable of controlling engagements with skill rather than strength. Colonel Morrison's transformation was particularly striking. The man who had once doubted Bruce's methods now became one of his most dedicated pupils. He trained like a novice, made mistakes, absorbed lessons, and then applied them with the discipline only decades of military experience could provide. The combination of traditional military training and Bruce's sensitivity principles forged a new breed of Marine, one capable of overwhelming strength, but also of refined skill, adaptable strategy, and acute perception. When the Marine Corps officially incorporated these principles into their combatives curriculum in 1972, it was a recognition that the nature of combat had evolved. Training no longer focused solely on aggression and brute force. It now included exercises in awareness, timing, and adaptive response. Thousands of Marines learned to apply Bruce's methods, not as a replacement for military training, but as a crucial complement. These skills would later prove invaluable in combat zones around the world, where size, strength, and aggression alone could not guarantee survival. In interviews decades later, Colonel Morrison often recounted the events of that July morning in 1971. He described standing on the dirt field, facing Bruce Lee, and experiencing 12 seconds that shattered everything he thought he knew about combat. But he spoke not with embarrassment, but with profound gratitude. Bruce Lee had shown him that experience, strength, and courage were vital, but not infallible. That learning never stops, and that humility is the foundation of mastery. Bruce's lesson went beyond combat. It was a lesson in life itself, that even the most skilled and experienced individuals have gaps to fill, that the pursuit of knowledge and growth never ends, and that the willingness to be challenged and to learn from others, regardless of their size, background, or status, is what defines a true warrior. The Marines who trained under Bruce carried these lessons forward. Some would later face life or death situations in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. In situations where brute force alone might have failed, they were able to rely on sensitivity, timing, and adaptation to survive. Smaller Marines could control larger opponents, teams could neutralize threats more efficiently, and individuals could anticipate danger in ways that traditional training had not prepared them for. Bruce Lee's influence had a tangible impact on their lives, long after he left the base. For Colonel Morrison, the experience changed not only his approach to teaching, but his perspective on leadership. Strength and authority were important, but the capacity to learn, to adapt, and to incorporate new ideas was even more crucial. He came to understand that a leader's true power lies not in demonstrating superiority, but in recognizing when to listen, when to learn, and when to empower others. The story of that day, the 12 seconds that stunned 1,000 Marines, became legendary within Camp Pendleton. It was told and retold not as a tale of humiliation, but as a lesson in growth, humility, and the evolution of combat. Bruce Lee, a civilian among soldiers, had bridged worlds with skill and insight, leaving a lasting imprint on one of the most disciplined fighting forces in the world. Years later, when Morrison reflected on the encounter, he always emphasized the principles over the spectacle. "It wasn't about defeating me," he said. "It was about showing us a different way of thinking, a different way of fighting, and a better way of preparing for the unexpected. Those 12 seconds taught me more than 30 years of experience ever could." Bruce Lee's philosophy, that size and strength are only part of the equation, and that sensitivity, adaptation, and precision are equally important, was immortalized in the Marines' training programs. What had once seemed like an unorthodox demonstration became a cornerstone of modern military combatives, a testament to the power of innovation and the willingness to challenge assumptions. The impact of that encounter extended beyond Camp Pendleton. Marines trained in Bruce's methods carried these lessons to battlefields across the globe, applying the principles to protect themselves, their comrades, and civilians alike. Lives were saved not by sheer strength, but by awareness, timing, and the ability to adapt in real time. The story became a lesson in both martial arts and leadership, demonstrating that even the most experienced warriors can be humbled, taught, and improved. Bruce Lee's visit, his 12-second demonstration, and the resulting curriculum changes at Camp Pendleton illustrate a universal truth: mastery is not static. True strength comes from the combination of skill, discipline, and the willingness to keep learning. A single encounter can redefine what is possible, reshape minds, and influence generations of warriors. That July day in 1971 was one such encounter, a moment where philosophy and practice intersected, producing a lesson that resonated far beyond the dirt training field. And so, the legacy of Bruce Lee at Camp Pendleton endures. It is found not only in the combatives curriculum, but in the mindset of Marines who understand that real power is not just in force, but in control, precision, and the ability to adapt. 12 seconds had shifted the trajectory of thousands of lives. 12 seconds had proven that principles matter more than size. 12 seconds had forged a lasting friendship between a martial artist and a warrior who discovered they had more in common than appearances suggested. Those 12 seconds remain a powerful reminder that learning, humility, and openness to new ideas are the true markers of strength, and that even the most disciplined warriors can grow when faced with a teacher who challenges everything they know.